My name is Michael Scott Shannon. I'm a radio programmer and radio DJ. I'm standing in 333 Meadowlands Parkway in Secaucus, New Jersey. Why? Because this is where the story began.
Serving the universe.
Good morning, everybody.
The top of the Empire State Building.
It's on the air everywhere.
WHTZ. We're going from worst to first.
Z100, babe.
This is what they mean by making a spectacle of yourself.
Hot hits.
Hot rocket.
Z100.
They've gone from worst to first.
They went from worst to first. The winning formula is wild and wacky.
Happy birthday.
You made my monkey wiggle.
Z100.
Z100, New York.
It's 8 minutes after 6 a.m., August the 2nd, 1983. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, radio station WHTZ signs on the air. WHTZ is owned and operated by Malright Communications and broadcast at a frequency of 100.3 megahertz. WHTZ is licensed to the city of Newark, New Jersey, with studios and offices in Secaucus, New Jersey. Signing on the air, this is WHTZ, Newark. It's time to wake up.
Scott Shannon is here. Look, this is the guy I pretty much owe a lot of my career to, because if it wasn't for this gentleman, coming up from Tampa and starting a new radio station from a jazz station that nobody listened to out of Newark, New Jersey, and turning it into the biggest top 40 station still to this day. If I didn't hear him on the phone, I'd hear him on the radio and giving out the phone number all the time. I wouldn't have been calling him at 5 years old before school, and him putting me on his show and getting that bug in my head that radio is what I wanted to do for a living. Mr. Scott Shannon's here.
He was so young, he could barely say his name.
Yeah.
So he called in and hello? And I said, yeah, hello. Who's this? Erik Noogie. I said, what's your name? Erik Noogie. And so then I said, how old are you, Mr. Noogie? He says, what'd you say, you're 27?
26 or something like that, yeah.
26 years old. I said, oh, 26, huh? What kind of car you drive? He says, a Lincoln Mercury. There's no car. So right about that time we go, oh, you drive a Lincoln Mercury. You already got your license at 26. Oh, yeah, I got a license.
I thought you had to be an adult to call the radio. So, I used to lie and say I was older. So, but
well, it can't be 26 when you're freaking 5. You can tell.
Yeah, but you got to be smart about these things. You got to, fake it till you make it.
That's what I did when I was a kid. The first time I went for an interview, I had been drafted. I was in the U.S. Army, and I had already tried. I ran away from home, and I tried to get a job, and I had no experience. I thought, well, if I want to be a DJ, I guess I can be a DJ.
Yeah.
And I would go into these different stations and say, I'm applying for a job. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? I'm a DJ. Well, how long have you been a DJ? Well, since I got here. And so finally, when I got into the U.S. Army, I was in small enough towns where you could go into the radio station and not have any experience.
Right.
Or at least lie to them and tell them you left your tape at home when you were drafted.
It was one of those jobs that if you just had somebody who would let you be there, you could learn the job while being there, and then that would be a career. Like, it's hard to do that nowadays.
Earn while you learn.
Correct.
And what I would do, when I was a kid, I'd ride around in an old beat up clunker, and I would listen to the radio, and I would try to imitate the man on the radio. I would practice. I would talk the record up.
Yeah.
And it just so happened to be the fellow was a happy talker, or as we used to call it, a puker. That's where a lot of radio guys were. They go, hi, everybody. It's me driving you home with 77 WABC. And where I lived, there's a guy named Jay Reynolds, and he would go, hi, everybody. It's the Jaybird driving you home on a fabulous Friday. And here's the Beatles. And so what I did, I would imitate that guy. Like you said, fake it till you can make it. And that's how I got my first job. And I really, after a while, I developed a style. But for like at least a year, I go, all right, here we go. We're playing the greatest hits right here for you, baby. And I'd always, good morning, everybody. And that was the way they sounded back then.
And I mean, that's how it used to be. And I grew up on Long Island, so I was. They used to. I'm sure you know this. New York is the biggest small market station in the country because you would hear a lot of like giant stations and even giant personalities there. But then it still always had the way it was run was a very small market kind of feel. Like it didn't feel like how LA kind of took itself way too seriously.
Well, I disagree with you on that because when I came here, people laughed at me, and I'd already had a pretty good amount of success in Atlanta, Tampa Bay. I was in Memphis. Not gigantic markets, but good-sized markets. And I was, every market I went to, I took the station to number one. And yet people in New York thought I was nobody. I was some hick from Tampa Bay. What's he doing coming here? And that was to my credit because nobody really worried about this new little baby radio station stuck in the swamp of Secaucus, New Jersey.
Yeah, you were very underestimated, so they didn't take you seriously, and then you wound up kicking their butts.
And then when we first had, our first number one after, almost 73, 74 days, they say, oh, this is just a fluke. It's a fluke. That's what they called it. People get tired of that quick. They're playing the same songs over and over and over. And they had no respect. And we couldn't even get the record companies to actually deliver the new records to the station. Back then, we still played records.
You had to go out. Yeah, you had to go out and buy your own stuff, which is...
I'd send Michael Ellis or Frankie Blue into the city, and they'd stop over at Tower Records. Back when the record stores, and I'd give them a list of things to get, or we would ask people on the air, we got Michael's going into Tower Records today, or Frankie's going into Tower, they would alternate, going into Tower Records today, and if there's any songs you think we should be playing on Z100, please let us know. You can call us. We didn't have social media in '83. And then people felt like they were a part of the radio station. And that's how a lot of the success of that station came, because we got the listener involved. They were a part of the team to recruit new people.
The whole point of the documentary that we're here to discuss, From Worst to First, the history of Z100, with you being so underrated, underestimated, they really didn't take you seriously. The first rating book was going to be a fluke. That they had their guard down, but the success to what you put together was not just the music, but you made sure everybody had a personality, not just the morning show and then some jocks. Every jock had to have a personality. Your production was larger than life and a lot of energy to it, a lot of creativity to it. It wasn't lazy. There was always stuff being generated every day based on stuff in the news or things that were just going on in people's lives. You were very fluid. It was very alive. It didn't feel stale.
You're very perceptive on this, Eric, because other stations would update their actual production and their jingles and all that, and the DJs would basically just intro the records and outro the records and promote what was going on at the station. But every day we tried to have something special or goofy going on at the radio station, and it was the station was built because the station was built like it was because I wasn't from around here. As Elvis Duran said in the documentary, he wasn't from around here, and people could tell it because I never lived here. I visited maybe 2 times in my whole life. I took a Greyhound bus here once to meet a girl, and I didn't know how to get around. I didn't know, I thought everything was like the Bronx, the Brooklyn, and all that kind of stupid stuff, And then when I got here, I had to completely rid myself of the fear. what am I doing in New York? I mean, all these big famous people here, Jim Kerr and Don Imus and Soupy Sales and all that kind of stuff. There was part of me was scared to death, and the other part was cocky and confident, but there was no middle ground, if you know what I mean. I'd spend half the time saying, we're going to rip this town apart. And the other said, I hope I last more than a month.
You approached it like a kid going to college, where if you have something in your head, it's like, I want to do that, I want to be that. And then your parents are telling you, well, make sure you have a backup plan in case that doesn't work out in a couple years, you can fall back on that. And more times than not, the most successful driven people are the ones who don't have that safety net, who don't have that backup plan. So it's like, we're going to go in here, we're going to make this the best we can. There's no option to fail here because I have nothing else to back this up.
You're exactly right. It's like you took a page out of my book. I spent a lot of time over the years doing seminars or speaking. I guess you could call it motivational speaking, but only to people in radio who are as crazy as I am. And what I would do, I would use that line. I succeeded because I didn't have a plan B. I left home when I was 17. I dropped out of high school halfway. If I'd have just hung around for another 3 or 4 months, I would have gotten a diploma. But I never really set foot on a college campus, and I just left home, like I said, when I was 17 and never went back. I had $40 to start with. That was it. And I wanted to be, from the time I was like 12 or 13, you started younger than I did. But back then, nobody at my age wanted to be a DJ when they were 12. But I listened to the radio constantly, and I loved rock and roll pop music. But like I said, I always had to succeed because I had no other choice. I don't know what I would have done. The only other thing I ever wanted to be was a baseball player. And, the minute I found out about music, that faded by the wayside. But you have to, two things, you have to be determined, and you can't have a plan B. There's no way.
You can't have that, because then you don't you need that fear to drive you. Like you can't be too comfortable, or else you won't get anywhere.
You can't walk the tight wire with a net under you, and that's simple. I had to make it, and I think that one of the things that I had going for me is I loved it so much it wasn't work to me. And I know a lot of parents tell their kids that, but I mean this was my love. I wanted to be. I read a Billboard magazine when I was like 14. I picked it up at a bookstore, and I said, this guy's sitting in this little room, just him with a microphone. Because I was really shy, I can talk to people without having to be there. Oh my God, this is great.
You just brought up a memory that I forgot about, seeing the trade magazines for the first time at a library, because I saw a Radio and Records and then a billboard, and I'm like, they make magazines about this? Like, I had no idea. So every time, you can't get a subscription to it. It's more of an industry thing. So when the library had it, I would always go to see when the next one would come in, because like, oh my God, I'm reading about radio and stuff across the country. Being in New York, had no idea about.
I have a little notebook that I kept, and I would cut out pages and pictures. I have a hot clock from a radio station in Providence from 1969. I have a picture of a DJ in Detroit that I never heard of, that was an R&B DJ from 1971. And I still have this in this little book a notebook. It's a black, clip notebook. And I just always was, that's all. I wanted to know everything about the business. I wanted to know about how the sound goes. I used to, when I was one of my first jobs in radio, part-time job, I worked at a station in Columbus, Ohio. And I was basically a board op while I was in the Army. And I would go by there and I'd run the board at night. And I'd walk outside because we were at the transmitter. And I walk outside while the song was playing because they had a gravel driveway coming up to the station. And I'd look at the towers, and I'm thinking, the voices come out of those towers, and they transmit to these radios around the whole town. And I thought that was amazing to me. I'd go out there like once a night and think about that. How the hell does that work?
I get in awe when you take the train from Secaucus going into Manhattan, and they have those 3 giant towers in the middle of the swamp right before it goes into the tunnel, and you pass it going in, and the first thing you see coming out. And I look at that all the time because I think like MCA had their transmitter thing there, and I always look at that. I'm like, one day I got to come over and take a photo of that and just kind of put it up on my wall because I always stare at it.
I think WHN had some towers there too. There's a couple of different stations in that same swamp.
Yeah.
Swamp. You know, one of the things, and we were talking about this biography, not a
documentary.
About this documentary, and you cut that out for me?
I'll cut that out for you.
You know, a little while ago, we were talking about this documentary, and there's some really good life lessons in this, and I didn't really realize it until it was put together and I was, watching it. Number one is I had a company and a guy who believed in me, a fellow named Milton Maltz, who headed up this company from Cleveland.
Yeah.
And when I first went to work for him, I said, I can't work for you people because I did a little research, and I said, they use consultants for their radio stations. They hired consultants. And I said, I like to do it by myself. I don't like any research people around me. I don't like any consultants. I just do it. He said, you do it all by yourself. You don't take any advice. I said, I take advice from the people that work on my team and are part of the on-air staff and the people who are around me in the station. That's where we talk together. We all get our own things going, and we pitch in and come up with ideas. He says, all right, we can do that. No consultants. He said, we do have a national program director. I said, well, I don't like to hear from him either. I said, but here's what I'll do. You give me 3 months without him talking to me, and then if you still don't like it, you can have him talk to me. How's that? He says, all right, you got a deal. But my point is, if you have a boss or a company that believes in you and they leave you alone to do the job that you were hired to do, that's a beautiful situation. And it's so many times, and I've experienced it a lot, since Z100, they hire you because they think you're the best in the field, and then they try to tell you what to do. Well, wait a minute. If I'm the damn best, what are you telling me what to do for?
Yeah, unfortunately, for whatever radio is still functioning, it's a lot of overly researched, and then you have multiple consultants, and then because of how nationally they program locally, you may have 3 or 4 different kind of bosses that you have to report
Correct.
to.
And one guy says this and the other guy tells you to do this, and you're going, what the F you want me to do?
I used to, with Sirius, when I was running the channels over there, I would tell them, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And then I would go do what I thought worked anyway. And when it succeeded, they all were like, see, I told you. I was like, yep. And I didn't do any of the stuff that they told me to do. I was like, because I knew it wouldn't work.
I had a guy that I worked with once in Tampa. And there's very few things that I really stick in my head because I had a leaky brain. And we were on a plane going to Houston. And they wanted me to go there and put the zoo format in Houston, which we did very successfully. But I'm thinking about not the program, but the general manager of the station. He said, we're going to have to fire him. We're going to have to let him go. I said, why is that? Why can't we just show him what we're going to do? He said, no, he thinks his way is the only way, and this isn't going to be his way. It's going to be your way. And I don't understand that. Why doesn't he? He said, Scott, after you've been in the business a while, and I've been in the business about 10 years at that point. I said, after you've been in the business for a while, you'll understand that there are people who would rather lose doing it their way than win doing it your way. And I went like this, holy crap, I never knew that. And sure enough, I ran into so many people that were like that. It's amazing.
Yeah, that people are afraid to, I don't know, they're afraid to try new things, but that's human nature. But they're also, when you're in this kind of business and you see, things going down, other companies, other formats, they're just not doing what they used to do anymore. You think that might reinvigorate you to try new things. Like, hey, let's get experimental. What was that idea you were telling me last time? Let's try that. Let's see if that worked. Like, you'd want to create. This is a creative medium. You're almost like an artist. And when you want to get so stale and so rigid to stay within the lines, it's just like, then why are you doing this anymore?
You know, the other thing is, too, a lot of it is in the execution. What people didn't figure out, they thought that I was a loose cannon and just a hick from the sticks of Florida, and they would listen to the station, and they couldn't figure out what we were doing. They didn't quite grasp it. Why I talked, I would come on the air at noon. I come on, I'd stop in at 3 o'clock, talk to the jock. How you doing? And we'd be on the air. Yeah, well, wait a minute, you're the morning guy. What are you doing on in the afternoon? You know, just but the station was rigidly formatted, and then we would break it here and there. It had an amazing discipline to the radio station.
I didn't think about that, but that's a very smart way to approach it, because people get afraid of change. If you change everything too drastically, they all freak out and won't give anything a chance. But if you're doing it little by little so that they don't even really notice that much, and then they go back and look and go, oh my God, it did change so much and I didn't even notice, you did it right.
Well, I really am analytical in some ways, and then in other ways I go with my gut. And
I wish more people did that.
What I did was I set the format up so tight and so rigid, and the execution had to be absolutely perfect. But that allowed us the room to do strange things and do things that were, adventurous.
Yeah.
And that was, nobody could comprehend that. You found stations. There were stations in the country that, let's let the DJs do what they want to do. They know what they're doing. They're communicators. And then you had a mess.
Yeah.
And then there's these guys, and I'm sure you've run across them before. They're the guys that everything's got to be just like this. Unless you do it my way, you can't succeed. You got to play the A record, then the B record, then the C record, and then you play another A record. You have to say this in and out of every record, every song you play, and you have to, they got all these rules, but there's no personality involved in the station.
That's why I give a lot of kudos to you and people who do music radio, because I learned early on. I liked doing music radio for a little while, but I realized I was like, this is not why I'm here. Like, this is not why I love this medium. I love hearing the different personalities. I love people's takes on things and the way that they do their production, or the way that they talk to the callers, the way that they interact with each other. And I realized, I'm like, I want to deal more with personalities and with programming and with talking, not scheduling music and figuring out selector and like, well, make sure this song plays every hour and 5 minutes, but not at this day part or a night part. Like, that didn't do it for me.
You should have somebody who knows how to do that, so you can be creative.
I did. And I do. That's why I'd work with those people. I'm like, this is you. You can handle that, because I'll go insane if I have to sit here and do this. I can do this stuff.
For radio people who are watching, the selector is it's a computer that actually will program your music. You put in the parameters and all that. And it was developed by a fellow at NBC. So originally, I think 2 NBC's stations had it. One was in New York, and the other was in Chicago, where a guy named Bob Pittman worked for NBC, and it was a country station, WMAQ, and the station in New York was WNBC. I happened to be in New York one weekend while I was in Tampa, and I visited some friends, and this was before Z100, and I heard the music on NBC, and the program director at that time was a fellow affectionately known as Pig Vomit.
Yeah.
And I called him. I said, Kevin, your music's different. What are you doing? He said, we got this new thing we're testing out called Selector, RCS. One of the guys in the company developed it. So he gave me the number, and I called the fellow up, just a genius. And I said, "Is it just NBC, or can I install one of those in my station here in Tampa?" Well, we were the first station outside of those two stations that were non-NBC stations to have it. And the funny thing about it was, and everywhere I went, I took that with me. Not the same one, but a selector. And it was so funny because I've never operated it. I never touched the machine.
You had somebody else do it.
I know what it does, and I hired people smarter than me to do it for me. I tell them what, I just heard a song that sounds, it sounds like Mariah Carey. It's not a Mariah Carey song, but you don't have it coded a Mariah Carey song. Blah, 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 blah. And then they code it. And when we came to Z100, we had what I called, I want salt and pepper music. I want one song that's pop, could be based white, could be by a black person, but it's pop. And then I want an R&B song next that has rhythm and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. 2 slow songs an hour, 1 per half hour. And that's how that format was developed. That music format was developed exclusively for that radio station, not for New York, but for that radio station and New York. And everybody, you look back too, you listen to the names of the people we had on the air, like you said. Janet from Another Planet, it had The Shadow. It had Hollywood Hamilton, Jack the Whack. And
I love Jack.
I wanted our people and that station to leave deep footprints in the minds of the listeners. I want them to be able to, I want the listeners to remember who they're hearing. And, at that time when we came on, there was no station that 99X had it for a while, but most stations had call letters.
Right.
WNBC, WPLJ, WABC.
They didn't have a moniker. They didn't have a name.
Z100. Wow, what the hell? What is that? When we first signed on, we didn't have any telephones, and people didn't know what we were. We didn't say New York. We didn't say New Jersey. We said Z100.
Did you ever hear the story? Because in New York, Z100 is on the frequency 100.3. Did you ever hear the story about why Howard created his channel at Sirius as Howard 100?
No, don't know that.
Because it was based on you. Because it was based on Z100, how it was the center of the dial. So that no matter what car, before they even had the digital stuff, you had the buttons where they would back and forth. But it would center itself so that you were always within the frequency tuning of 100.3 because it was in the middle of the dial. And the way you programmed it was just you were in the center of everything. And that always resonated with him. So when he went to launch his channels, he made sure he was 100. So he was in the middle of everything.
I don't think he would admit that.
He said it. It's in his history of Howard Stern documentary thing that he did on his channel.
I never knew that.
I'll get it to you. But I just always found that amazing. Like the frequency was perfect, the naming was perfect, the personalities, the music was all unheard of, and then having a morning show that was putting out albums and larger than life personalities and characters and people impersonating voices calling in. It was so much for 4 hours. There was just so much going on.
It was meant to be. I called it 2x4 radio. It's like somebody hit you over the head with a 2x4, and that was what the listening experience was like. And like you said before, every day we tried to have a new song on from Dr. Dave Cullen, or we had some kind of a rumor we heard. I don't know if this is true or not, but is Michael Jackson really LaToya in disguise?
Yeah, you had that, and then and Mr. Leonard,
and all that. Hold up the first album, the one we're in a band. Yeah. Hold it up. Now put it closer to the camera. Yeah. Look at how we all were dressed up.
Like Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah, like a kind of a Sgt. Pepper album. And all those people on that's the original Zoo right there. Kid on the drums is Captain Kevin. He was a reject from the New Jersey Generals football team right across the street. and we put him on the air. He'd never even been close. I don't think he'd ever been in a radio station before we put him on. John Bell, the John Bell, who was a member of our staff.
Right there.
He worked at the old station. He was in charge of play-by-play tennis.
Ugh.
And when it got bored on the station, I would say, "Give me some of that. Give me," because he was on the old WV&J, and they signed radio tennis. Can you imagine? So I would go, "All right, give me his Billie Jean King, forehand over to the left corner. Here comes Wanda Jackson. She's got that going. Oh, look out! Look out! Look out! Oh, out of bounds."
13 Love.
And we would do that. We would just do it like, we do it for about 30, 40 seconds till I got tired of it. And I said, I can't imagine how hard that is to keep people's attention with the radio tennis. Good Lord.
Did you ever get to a point with doing this morning zoo format? Because a lot of, for a while it was a punchline. It's like, oh, somebody's doing a wacky morning zoo kind of thing. But it was never like that for the longest time. It was actually kind of, it was kind of praised. It was something brand new. And even for like the first 10 years, it was still something that people weren't doing. Because it took a lot of writing, it took a lot of prep, it took a lot of production, it took voice talent. There was a lot of parts to make something successful, and you could always tell the people who were doing it well compared to the people who were just using the moniker and maybe a prep service and really weren't putting the life and the spirit into it. That eventually your creation, which was beloved for so long, that you get to the point, it gets bastardized, and then like, I kind of want to kill this off.
Well, what happened was people who shouldn't have been doing personality radio were attempting to do personality radio. You can't have a horn, and a drum in there. We didn't start the drum, by the way. Howard did that. I got that from Howard when he was in Washington, so we're even. Yeah, but it was just funny how they bastardized it. And the other thing was a lot of talented radio guys were forced to do the zoo format. What was that guy in Philadelphia that Howard almost drove in?
Yeah.
Remember him?
Yeah.
Or white?
Why can't I think of his name?
I see his face.
Yeah, DeBella. Yeah, John DeBella with the bald head with the mustache.
He didn't want to do the zoo.
Yeah.
He was on FM radio. He was a rock station. No, you're going to do the zoo. I know the guy's another great show, Bob and Tom in Indianapolis. Yep. The guy that ran that station made them do the zoo. They're hilarious on their own. They were great.
How did they get to use the names if it wasn't within the company?
Because I was too stupid at the time and naive. I never really copyrighted it.
Oh, okay. Because I always wondered that.
Everything that we did at that station, and I'm not saying this is a great idea. Whatever we did at that station, people copied it, whether it was right or wrong. We did stupid things. We made mistakes. I mean, we had a jingle for John Bell, because John was the public service director, and at the end of the show, I would play this song called Alley Cat. I just liked it. Kind of a rambling. Let's see, what do I got here? I thought I had it here. Just a rambling instrumental, and he would read a couple of PSA announcements where there's going to be some bake sales, where there's going to be a church carnival. He'd pick one from Jersey, one from one of the 5 boroughs, one from Westchester, and that would be it. And now the Jonathan B. Bell world famous community bulletin board. And over there in Montclair today, there's going to be a church festival and all that. And so one day I just was coming to work. I thought, you know what? He doesn't have a jingle. We got to get John a jingle.
I remember that one, yeah.
You remember that? So I said, I wrote this, I think I stretched it out because I wanted it to be like an old time, the mighty.
It's like one of those old radio serials where they used to tie in the sponsor name into whatever. The mighty
sound of New York, today's hit music on.
Yeah.
WMCA, home of the good guys, that kind of thing. So I did one that goes, now, the Jonathan B. Bell, world famous, incredible, get down like a hound community bulletin board. And they sang it. So I talked about, all right, John Bell, we're getting him a jingle. He doesn't have a jingle. And then remember when they used to do those album listening parties?
Mm-hmm.
So we did. We went over to the Hula Hands in Secaucus. There's a little mall there, Hula Hands in Secaucus, and we gave away tickets to the Jonathan B. Bell Community Bulletin Board Jingle listening party.
Oh, geez.
We had a listening party, and we had about 40, 50 people there, and the jingle was about 30 seconds long, and they said, you're going to hear it before anybody in the country hears this jingle. And we played it over and over, and it was free drinks for everybody. We did it like at 4:00 in the afternoon, so people coming by, and it was great. But a listening party for a radio jingle, and the tickets, people were all excited about getting tickets. I'm going to go, and then Jams Jingle, the Jams Jingle people in Dallas would have to take. People from around the world, not just in America, wanted our jingle package. So one day, Jonathan Wolford called and said, you won't believe this. We got a French station up in Canada. Wants your jingle, wants the jingle package, the flamethrower package. But they want the community bulletin board jingle. They wanted it. So he sent me a copy of it, and they had a French version of the community bulletin board and all this. Oh my God! I played that a couple of times and introducing John, so that was pretty funny.
That's another thing you did on that station that was great, because you were talking about other stations when other stations, their whole thing was just ignore them. They're not going to be a problem. If you don't address them, we're not giving them any attention. But you would take shots at your competition because you guys were fighting for your lives with it, building this up. So you were taking shots at everybody. You were goofing on whoever the top people were, the top personalities in New York, or even the politics, the news, anybody who was relevant at the time. Then you're like, all right, we need to go after them and punch up.
We beat the crap out of Regis Philbin. He loved it. I mean, he loved it. We did a parody song. He wore a dingleberry beret.
Yeah. You also had
him.
You guys did a parody of One Night in Bangkok about Regis. It was like one night with Regis, and you want to up Chuck, and then you're just playing clips from the show. I was like, God, that's so ballsy.
And the poor guy from PLJ,
Larry Berger.
Larry Booger. We wrecked that poor guy.
Yeah.
I never met Larry.
Really?
Never met him. One day, I had a friend of mine who was a record promoter, and he was taking Larry to dinner, and Larry had to stop by and pick up his laundry on the way from this Chinese laundry by his apartment
right
in the city. And so he walked in there. He's with the record guy. Record guy told me this, and he said, and Larry gave him the ticket. Who fought? He said, Larry Berger. He said, you mean like Larry Booger? He went crazy. The guy said, no, Larry Berger, not Booger. He flipped out, but the guy was just thought he mispronounced his name.
Yeah, you did stuff like that all the time. You would poke fun at personalities, and he wasn't even on the air. He was just the PD GM over there. And then you rebranded their radio station too. You were giving them their own monikers and stuff for the people you were.
Well, what happened was because before we got there, they switched. They knew we were coming, so they wanted to cover that top 40 slot. But they were known around radio as one of the greatest rock stations in the country.
Yeah.
They gave all that up to protect their top 40 flank. So they started playing Michael Jackson records, and they played One Night in Bangkok. They played all these pop songs. And people went crazy. What happened to the legendary PLJ? So I did a rap about it, and that's the funny thing about it. I could be very serious. I moved here, and I was so excited I could listen to that PLJ. That was famous. I never got to hear it before as a macho rock station. And I get here, and all of a sudden I'm hearing Wimp Radio. like, they ought to change their call letters to WIMP. And we made up this whole deal that they were, since they switched format, they were losing so much money, they had to move out of New York, and they were working. They had set the station up in a bowling alley in Piscataway, New Jersey. And you could hear when I'll switch over and see what they're doing right now. And you're, hey, it's little Larry Booger on WIMP. Here's Jim Kerr. And then you'd hear the bowling balls going down the bowling alley and all that kind of thing. And then I would actually, during the morning show, I'd say, all right, let's see what they're doing. Let's see what Jim's doing over at Wimp Radio. And we have a little dial twisting through there, and you'd hear, you light up my life. Oh, God, I can't take it anymore. Turn it off, JR. And it was just, and then we had a mole in the station. So we knew when they couldn't beat us. And they tried and tried. They would let people go, and this guy wasn't right. They changed the processing on the station, and every time that somebody was going to get fired, we knew about it. And we go, they would call Larry Berger into the GM's office, and Ross Britton played the GM. Well, Larry, get your ass in here. Okay, man, I'll be right there. What's wrong now? You got to get rid of Rockin' Randy in the afternoon. He sucks. His ratings are all the way down to the floor. And he said, what do you mean? He's a good guy. I don't give a rat's ass. You got to fire him. If your name's Larry Booger, do the job. That kind of stuff. I'm doing skits on your show.
I know. I love it. It's fantastic. But we got to tell everybody again, the reason that you're here is to promote this documentary about the station you built and created, and still to this day is the top station in the United States.
I wasn't the only person that built and created that radio station. There was another. I was the captain of the ship, but we had an awful talented crew over there.
Very much so.
It was kind of funny because we had a lot of people who worked at the radio. So we didn't have a lot of people who worked there, but the people that did work there, some of them had never been associated with a winning radio station before. And it was so great to see that day when the ratings came out. We were number one in New York. And I got to tell you something. I saw people crying. They never had that feeling before. They, worked at different places, but we put together a ragtag, team of almost pirates and got the job done. I had Ross was great. I had Hollywood on the air, and our music department with I'm not going to go through all the names, but it was everybody pulled their own weight, and everybody had more than one job too. It was a very special time, and like I said, it's amazing what you can do when someone hires you and lets you do your job.
For you out there, if you want to check out all of this stuff, this documentary, it's called Worst to First, The True Story of Z100 New York. It's going to be released on February 11th on Apple, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Vudu, the Microsoft stuff. Yeah, it's everywhere that you can download movies and things of that nature. You'll be able to find it, and you should definitely check it out, especially if you're in radio, if you have any inkling of interest in radio. This is a story that you definitely want to watch and you don't want to miss out on. Elvis Duran is part of this project here, producing this thing.
Well, one of the things that we tried to do, we tried to show the fact that we built that thing originally to last for a long, long time. A lot of times, if you had a favorite radio station, a couple of years and it's gone.
Yeah.
But this was actually planned. The Z100 brand was firmly placed in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the tri-state area. And that was no accident. We wanted it, it's simple, it's short, and it still stands for the best top 40 music in the country, really, if you think about it. Still has great DJs on there. Elvis has been over there. He does the show that I started out with. Now I'm over at CBS FM, where I'm gainfully employed in the morning, and 101.1 FM. And we put this together because everybody wanted me to, would you write a book? I don't want to write a book. Elvis tried to write a book. It Even he will admit it wasn't what he planned, but he got it done. And my wife Trish came up with this idea: instead of a book, why don't we do a documentary? I said, well, that sounds like a lot of work. She said, no, that won't be so bad. Yeah, okay, Trish. And it's got a lot. It's got plenty of people. Our old buddy Tony Orlando, who was the first guest we ever had on the air. And don't ask me why. No one else would come over there at that time, but he did, and he was nice about it. You got Bon Jovi, John's in the movie. We got Taylor Dane in the movie. We got let's see here. Oh, Debbie Gibson.
Yeah,
we were one of the first two stations in the country to play her song. And we got Clive Davis in the movie.
I used to hear, growing up listening to that, I used to hear a lot of artists that would show up asking to play their music, and finally you guys gave them a shot. They'd come in on the morning show. I think Mariah Carey was one of them too, where like, you guys were the first to play my music because they were begging and hounding you, and they grew up listening to the station, and you guys broke so many people.
Yeah, well, we had the power. I mean, you want to do that. And I think people that listen to radio appreciate the fact that you give new artists a shot. That was a part that we did. And when we first started, we couldn't do that because we had to play nonstop number one, number two, these huge hit records. And as soon as we got established, then we kind of, lightened up a little bit, and we took some chances, and most of them worked out all right.
God bless you, Scott. I mean, you're still doing it. You have a legacy that's going to long live after all of us are all gone. I do
it because I love it, period.
That's why you should do anything. Have the passion.
By the way, I want to tell people who might want to get the documentary. You can rent it for like $3, or you can get your own copy of it, and it's Apple Plus is an easy place to go. But anywhere where you get on demand, I think the actual thing is about $12 if you want to own it forever.
It's worth the money.
It's online. When are you going to run this anyway? You don't know?
We're going to run it this Friday.
Oh, okay. And then you can get it today.
Yeah, get it today.
Over the weekend. Instead of, they don't have the Kitten Bowl on against the Super Bowl this weekend, so you can watch it instead of the Kitten Bowl.
There you go.
Thank you for having me.
No, Scott, I owe so much to you for just. All right. Don't do it. I know, but this is for the audience. There's showmanship to do here. I owe you so much for getting me into this. And look, over the years, you've been so incredibly kind. You do the intro for this show that I play every time, and.
About that.
Yeah, I just look, man. It's weird to say to another grown.
You got any publishing on that? Any money coming my way?
No, unlike the other name, you forgot to copyright it, so everyone's using it now. But thanks, man. I love you so much, and I'll talk to you again another time.
Thank you, Erik. Love you, man.
Scott Shannon.